On this inside line, I'm diving back into my 2020 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon project. Now previously, I showed you everything it took to put these Dynatrac ProRock XD60 axles under the Jeep, along with these 40-inch Nitto Trail Grapplers. Now, after having this set up for a little over 6 months, I want to dive into what I've learned about on-road driving, off-road driving, and if all of this effort was worth it. All right, so let's get to it. So let's jump right into it, and I think an easy way to show you how this thing drives is to literally show you. And I think a great way to see if it's a handful or not is let you see my steering wheel and how much my hands are moving. Now, the big thing to note here is my Gladiator is still running the factory aluminum steering gearbox. These things are notorious for having a little bit of play, and this one definitely does. Stock, it wasn't super noticeable. 35s, it became a little bit more noticeable. 37s, you said, okay, you could feel it, but it wasn't so obnoxious. Now on the 40s, it's definitely prevalent that you've got this like little bit of a dead spot there. I don't think I'm going to be able to take it to the dealership and get them to swap out for the iron gearbox at this point, so probably going to have to live with this until I move up to a stronger steering system. That being said, it really drives surprisingly well. I don't have any type of steering assist or steering stabilizer on here. Don't get any shimmy or any weirdness. The 40s are not balanced, not getting any wobble out of those, so that's fantastic. Running about 28 PSI is my street pressure, and I think a big reason that this drives so well is the fact that I did go with the 72.5-inch axle width with the 5.5 inches of back spacing, and that's huge. It makes the scrub radius on this thing really fantastic, and you can be in a parking lot and dry steer it and move around without issue. I mean, I'm sitting here at a light, obviously, and I have no issue moving these tires around, which is pretty incredible. Overall power, yeah, it's down from the 37s, but it's really not bad. It's no 392, but it definitely, like with the 8-speed, man, it's pretty incredible how well this thing moves just in general. Would I like a little bit more power? Of course, why not? But for daily driving and even driving it in the mountains, it has not been an issue. With the 538s, it still can keep 8th gear. Now, once you get into higher elevation, yeah, it drops down into 6th and 7th a little bit more, but really not that bad. For around town, it's pretty fantastic. Fuel economy, I think it's worth noting. So I've had these axles since August of 2021, and so far my actual hand calculated fuel economy has been about 13.4. That's the average. Obviously I've done worse and I've done better, but 13.4 is what I'm getting with 40s. I'm maybe a little aggressive on my stop and go, and I think that hurts me a bit, but you know, 50, 55 seems to be the sweet spot for fuel economy. My best tank doing some long miles like country back roads has been around like 15.5, so that was pretty good. In general, I think the overall, if you're going to try to drive this every day, I think it's perfectly fine. It's not obnoxious. This JKS suspension rides really well. I've got no complaints about that. It feels very stable around corners, it's comfortable, and I would say maybe the last but maybe most important thing in terms of drivability, braking system on this. Now Dynatrac gives you new calipers and rotors, front and rear, but what's really nice is that you don't have to change out your master cylinder, so you don't have this weird spongy pedal. And even better is, man, these things I think stop better than factory. I wish I could put a set of stock tires on this thing and go back to back with a stock Gladiator and see which one had a shorter braking distance, because these are phenomenal. I mean, with 40's, the way it stops, it's pretty incredible. That's maybe like my biggest surprise on these axles. I didn't know how the brakes were going to react. Didn't know if you'd have to do a bigger master or anything like that. And you don't. Brakes feel fantastic, and this is on-road and off. I'll dive into more off-road stuff here in a minute, but I think the big takeaway here is you really do get a lot of confidence with the brakes. I think if I do end up doing some trailer stuff a little bit later on, I feel a lot better knowing that these brakes are pretty darn big and it stops really well. You know, maybe the biggest drawback here obviously is I lost about 3 miles per gallon going from a 37 to a 40. I mean, but I also put in bulletproof, you know, full float 60 series axles and added 40's on. Obviously this thing's not terribly aerodynamic, so it's all a big trade-off. Now I'm running a 40 by 1350 R17 Nitto Trail Grappler. Now this is a load range C tire, and I am incredibly happy with how it works. I've had plenty of experience with the Trail Grapplers in the past. They don't make a ton of noise, so all that's been really good. Going with this Trail Ready bead lock, the wheels themselves are tapped, so you don't have a steel insert like you do on some of the other bead locks that are out there. Like my KMCs had steel inserts on them. These do not. Hasn't been an issue. I used anti-seize on the bolts. Everything's been good. They do have a spacer that you can buy if the bead is too thick. I did not find that I had to do that with this. Haven't had an issue with leaks or problems. They're fairly easy to air down. The only thing that they tend to do is pull a little water, so you got to really get in there to get that out. Not really a big deal beyond that. I like the polished finish. I didn't really know what color tire and wheel or what color wheel finish I wanted to do on this thing. I have a feeling I'm going to end up making these things black, but we'll see. I don't know. Drop me a comment if you think that you have an idea for a better color. I know black is kind of boring. In terms of the spare, it definitely takes up a ton of room in the bed. I'm constantly changing the configuration on the back of this thing just to fit my needs, whether I put the rooftop tent on so the kids can go play on the beach, or I'll just toss the spare in the back here so I have room in the back. I've done a ton of different configurations, whether my bed cover. Right now I just have the spare sitting on my AA Products rack. You know, it's a 40. It's a lot to carry around. A lot of times I won't even take it with me. I'll just have the bed open so I can put the motorcycles in the back. One of the nice things about this thing only having 3 inches of lift and 40's, it's still not super obnoxious in terms of how tall it is. I have a 7-year-old daughter and she can climb in and out of this thing no problem, which was great. I'm not a super tall guy and it's not hard for me, so I love this low lift big tire combo. It works well. And I think that's a good segue to really talk about how this thing does off-road and if all of this really made a huge difference on the trail. So let's talk about off-roading, and I think a great place to start with that conversation is right back here with my broken tail light, because it's really a telltale sign of some of the challenges still associated with wheeling the Gladiator. Now, the first shakedown run I did with this thing, I did it post axle break-in. So that means I got my 500 miles on the axles, changed my gear fluid. That's really easy with the Dynatracs. They use a O-ring on their cover, so there's no RTV or anything to have to worry about to get off. Got the axles broken properly, then hit the road to go take this thing. The closest place to me was Uwharrie National Forest, and I thought that was a good place to shake it down. It's not a super hard place. There are some big obstacles there, but I wanted to go ahead and at least see if there was something that maybe I'd overlooked and kind of learn a little bit about it. So went up there. Before I even took the Jeep off-road, I took my KTM out and proceeded to fracture my shoulder. I did not realize I had fractured it, but I knew I was hurt. But I took some ibuprofen, took the bike back to the cabin, unloaded it, and went back on the trail because I'd driven all that way and I wanted to wheel, and that's what I did. The reason I mentioned that is because I was really concerned that the steering was going to be super heavy, and so I didn't air down a lot. So some of these clips that you'll see where I had the rooftop tent on in the back and I'm in Uwharrie, if the tires don't look like they're super aired down, well, there's a reason. I didn't air down a lot because I was worried the steering was going to be crazy heavy and my shoulder was just going to kill me. So I think I dropped about like 17 or 18 pounds. It should have been lower, but I just said, you know what, I'm gonna do this and get at least some shakedown run. So that was my initial run, and immediately I could tell I had a ton of clearance, and the 40s just made a huge difference. I didn't think it would make that big of a difference over a 37, but it absolutely did. Now keep in mind, I'm running the same JKS manufacturing 3-inch suspension kit as has been on this thing for a year now. The only difference is it's got the bigger Dynatrac axles and the 40. So I didn't do a lot for lifting it suspension-wise. That's all pretty much the same. But the 40s, that larger footprint, has really helped keep it where I'm not grabbing the belly of this thing constantly. There are times that I'm still, if I try a harder line, it will grab the frame rail. That hits more than anything else on this thing. And that'll spin you around. You sort of have to, reevaluate your line and get back up it. It's a long Jeep, and compared to Wranglers, which I've been wheeling way more than this or got more experience with, you definitely have to plan ahead. It's kind of what makes the Gladiator a lot of fun is you really have to think about what you're doing. Even on 40s, it's not just a point and shoot vehicle. It's a lot to navigate, and it's kind of exciting. If you get used to a certain trail system and things kind of get easy, this will keep you on your toes. It is a bigger vehicle. Now, one of the things I do often when I wheel by myself is I'll use my drone as my co-pilot. It'll be my eyes outside of the vehicle, my spotter, if you will. And I made a little mistake in Uwharrie on the second ledge. Didn't quite realize I was going to be that close and ended up breaking my rear tail light and pushing it out. I still haven't swapped it out yet. It's still working. I actually have some bed stuff that's coming for this thing that I don't think this is going to be a problem anymore. So I'll get into that in a later video. But I think it's still worth noting that, look, even on 40s, you still have a lot of breakover to tend with, and it being this low, I still hit my hitch on things, going up steeper obstacles. I still hit it coming down stuff. I mean, it's moving to a 40 helped with that tremendously, but without going up a lot in lift, you still hit that stuff. And to me, it's a trade-off. I like how low and wide this thing is. The suspension rides really nice. In terms of travel, the rear doesn't have a ton of flexibility based off of how those arms are. It works pretty well, but I will hang a rear tire from time to time if you get this thing really twisted. Ride quality wise, it's been really nice. You do blow through the shocks a little bit faster if you're hitting stuff harder. You have a little bit more weight underneath the vehicle that's unsprung, so that's not that surprising. The 40 has such a large footprint that even if you don't have a crazy long travel suspension kit, the Jeep rides awesome off-road, and it's very stable and smooth, and you can take the family out and it doesn't jostle you around a lot. So I'm loving that. I'm loving the ride quality of it for sure. These Nittos hook up extremely well off-road. I mean, I've got 6 months of actual miles of time breaking in these tires, and I'm very happy with them. They're not chunking up, they're not getting torn up. Super excited to take this thing on some adventures later this year and see how they do and stuff on the West Coast. But very happy with that. I have a selectable e-lockers. So these are the Eaton e-lockers that are wired using the Taser or Z Automotive harness. So I'm able to use my factory switches. I've become so accustomed to using the factory locker switches that it's kind of nice. It's easy to use. A S-Pod would be a little bit, maybe faster, but this was a lot simpler. I didn't have to do any extra wiring. I found that they're pretty easy to engage and disengage. I don't really have an issue with the speed of that. They're very similar to stock in that respect. With the Taser on here, I can use the locker and two-wheel drive. So if I want to goof around for whatever reason, I can do that. I can use them in high as well. So the lockers have been fine. No issues there in terms of power off-road. The 4-to-1 with the 538s gives me a great crawl ratio, especially with this deep first gear that comes on these 8 speeds. So I found that I'm often clicking it up into second gear to get a little bit more speed off-road, but it's really easy to handle. It's got great sort of compression braking going down stuff, so plenty of control. The brakes are fantastic off-road. That has been I keep going back to it. The brakes are just phenomenal on these things. The Dynatrac really just, they got it perfect. So I've got no complaints there. The housings themselves, in terms of, you've got these big 60s with this crazy silhouette that's, very unique to Dynatrac. They've been awesome. I'm not getting hung up. The front one I don't hit very much at all. I have banged my tie rod a couple times into some things. Just poor driving on my part, haven't bent anything, so that's been great. The rear axle, rear differential being low pinion, I've hit it a few times and it has skidded across fairly easily on different rocks and obstacles, so that's been fine. Really don't get into the tubes too much. I'm not trying to be Johnson Valley hardcore rock crawler guy, and I don't want to pretend to be. But these are great so far for all the trails that I'm doing, and really what I got planned, I think they're going to be great for that. No issues out of the brackets. Everything has just been fine, and I think that's really kind of what it should be for really high quality turnkey aftermarket axles. So no complaints there, no leaks, no issues one way or the other. Very happy with how the vehicle feels. Now, one thing I was really curious about off-road is how this front end was going to feel once I had low air pressure and that front axle was locked up without having any type of hydraulic assist. And what I can tell you is that there were definitely times that I've had it in a situation where the front end's locked up, it's sort of bound up, and hydraulic assist, I feel like could have pushed that front axle where it needed to be, and without having it, I wasn't able to do that. So, do I still think hydraulic assist is a good investment, or I want to do that? I think so. Can you run it without it? Well, I think it depends on the type of wheeling you're doing. If you're doing a lot of overlanding or not really going to be getting your front end bound up in a lot of rock scenarios, it's really good. Like with the front differential open in this thing off-road, even at 12 PSI, 8 PSI, you can still steer. It's kind of amazing how well it works. So I didn't expect that. Again, the stock steering gearbox is not great. I want to do something about that, mostly for on-road driving than anything else, because you do have that weird dead spot, but very, very impressed with that. Dynatrac does build these axles with a mount. It has a skid plate for, so if you're going to put a hydraulic ram on, you can bolt on your ram. I already have the mounts on it, and then you'll have this big heavy duty skid plate, so you don't have to worry about that. So I'm really excited about that. So it's there for whenever I need or want to upgrade. So that's going to be maybe the next thing I do. I've got, like I say, a lot of really cool trips that I'm excited about to take this thing on, and I think it's important to get this thing super reliable for if I am in a hard scenario. I don't want to be in a spot where I can't move this thing, and because it's so big, I end up tearing up a piece of the body one way or the other. The big question is, was all of this worth it? In my mind, yes. I feel way more confident that I'm not going to have to worry about breaking an axle shaft and driving this thing cross country. I'm not going to sweat it as much when I hit the trail and air down and try something a little bit harder. None of this is cheap. I'm not going to like skirt around that. Putting any aftermarket axle under a Gladiator and 40's and everything that comes with it is just a huge investment. And that's really what it is. It's an investment. I sort of look at the ratio of, if you do this, you don't really have to have a tow rig and a trailer, so that's a lot cheaper when you consider it that way. I know that might be a silly thing in some people's mind, but realistically, if you're the type of person that just wants to wheel your Jeep everywhere and drive it and not have to worry about a tow rig and all that stuff, suddenly investing in axles and big tires doesn't seem that crazy. And yeah, losing 3 miles per gallon to go to a 40 for, especially if you're going to drive your Jeep every day, that sucks. But it's 13 miles per gallon. Like, these things don't get that good a fuel economy to begin with. And honestly, if you're worried about fuel economy, you're probably not putting your Jeep on 40's, let's be honest. So Overall, I would say I would 100% do it again. I'm glad I went with 40s. I feel like the 42s, I would be looking for more power, and I also feel like they would have rubbed a lot more. These really don't rub at all, so that part is great. Could it use more suspension lift off-road? I think so. I still hit, and that might be something that I have to address later, but right now, I love the low lift, big tire look. This thing visually to me is super exciting, and I think that's a big part of anything is you want your vehicle to look good. You know, I'm not trying to build a mall crawler, but I want it to be exciting to look at. That's just part of building vehicles in general. So overall, been happy with how everything has worked. Would definitely do it again. I've got some big trails and trips coming up for this thing, so please consider subscribing to the channel, liking, drop a comment, let me know what you guys are thinking of my build series. If you ever have any questions for me, you can always find me at Ollie Mansour Editor on Instagram. And until next time, I hope to see you guys on the trail soon.